It's May 14th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the 21st presidential election campaigning. On the second day of their official campaigns, 3 presidential candidates headed to southeastern parts of the country to garner support in the nation's conservative strongholds. The 3 will continue to make a strong push in Busan and Gyeongsang-namdo province on Wednesday. U.S. President Donald Trump says he's dropping long-standing sanctions against Syria. He also noted his willingness to form a new partnership with Iran, though Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, he says. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he will take part in ceasefire negotiations, but only if a Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin is present. The Kremlin is yet to make it clear whether Putin will attend talks in Istanbul on Thursday. We are exactly 20 days away from the snap presidential election. Candidates are traveling across the country to woo voters, and the 3 main runners all made it down to the southeastern part of the country on Tuesday. Let's start with Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung. Our Shin Hyeong followed a trail.
National unity was a key topic that Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung shared during his second day of campaigning for the presidency. Lee kicked off Tuesday in Gumi, the birthplace of former conservative President Park Chung-hee, known both for his autocratic rule and having led the country's rapid economic development. Lee's visit to Gumi was part of his campaign through regions known as traditional conservative strongholds, including Gyeongsang-buk-do province, Daegu, and Ulsan. The DP said Lee's visit to this key industrial area shows how strong his intention is to bring the country together and promote balanced regional growth. Lee laid out his vision to make Gumi a key engine driving South Korea's economy. He also acknowledged Park's contributions to the country's industrialization and promised to be a capable leader. Lee said the country's future matters more than political size or ideology.
What matters most is people's everyday lives, not left or right, red or blue, or where you're from. It doesn't matter if a policy came from Park Chung-hee or Kim Dae-jung. If it works, we use it. If not, we don't. Ideology isn't as important as the lives of our people and the future of this country.
In the afternoon, Lee visited Pohang, the nation's traditional powerhouse for steel, seeking voters' support. During his speech, Lee Jae-myung urged people to come together to overcome the hardships that follow the declaration of martial law. He also emphasized national unity regardless of political affiliation. Lee wrapped up his Tuesday campaign in Ulsan, where he focused on strategies for industrial growth and supply chain restructuring. Shin Hyeong, Arirang News, Pohang.
And the Conservative Party candidate Kim Moon-soo was also in the southeast, courting the party's loyal base after the impeachment fallout and the recent presidential nomination turmoil. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon follows this report from Busan.
People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo spent a second straight day campaigning in the Gyeongsang-do region Tuesday, pledging to revive an area that's seen a clear population decline. He wrapped up the day's events at a local market in Busan, the nation's second largest city, promising more jobs and better infrastructure.
If I become the president, I will build an express train system here and make the surrounding cities all within 30 minutes of each other. Busan, Ulsan, and Gyeongsang-namdo province will become one giant and the best global city that can be on a par with the capital.
While cities like Busan here are traditionally viewed as a conservative stronghold, Kim enters the race at a disadvantage on impeachment of its former president and the turmoil between Kim and the leadership over Kim's candidacy. That's likely why he started his first extended stay here in this region to solidify his supporter base. Before Busan, he was also in the neighboring city of Ulsan, a major industrial city as well. For this city, he pledged a multicultural complex.
The city has requested a large-scale cultural complex, estimated cost around 500 billion won. If I'm elected president, I'll make sure it doesn't take long. I'll allocate a special budget of that amount to Ulsan as soon as I take office.
But Kim's visit to the southeast doesn't end there. On Wednesday, he's expected to campaign in smaller cities like Jinju and Sachon, continuing efforts to shore up support. At the same time, how to deal with issues regarding former President Yoon Suk-yeol and his martial law declaration continues to cast a shadow over the campaign. In a televised interview Monday, Kim offered his first public apology for the incident and its aftermath to the nation. The apology also gave attention to calls from some to expel Yoon from the party. Kim responded to this on Tuesday morning, saying whether the president leaves the party or not is up to him. It's not right for the party to decide that for him. With some party loyalists still backing Yoon, Kim must walk a fine line, keeping the base intact while reaching out to undecided voters, many of whom remain critical of the martial law attempt. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, Busan.
And the Reform Party candidate Lee Jae-myung also made sure to cement his presence in the conservative stronghold of Daegu City. Starting with a rally in the city's commercial center, Lee then sat down for lunch with students at a university cafeteria before heading for talks with medical professionals. The 40-year-old candidate declared himself the future of Daegu, emphasizing his youth and intentions to interact directly with all those involved. He also found a fault with the Conservative Party president hopeful for failing to oust the impeached former president from the party. Similarly, he accused the Liberal Party candidate of abusing legislative power to attack the former administration while inciting political division. Washington has reacted positively to proposals put forward by Seoul during bilateral trade talks before South Korea's presidential election. According to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Tuesday during a Saudi-U.S. investment forum in Riyadh, Seoul came with very good proposals despite going into the process of a change of government. However, he did not elaborate what the proposals were. South Korean officials say the two sides discussed ideas for economic and industrial cooperation, especially in the shipbuilding industry. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced the removal of all U.S. sanctions on Syria during a state visit to Saudi Arabia. He also expressed a willingness to strike a deal with Iran there while warning Tehran against its pursuit of nuclear weapons. Our Park Go-nu reports.
The more than a decade-long U.S. sanctions on Syria to pressure the country's former dictatorship are set to be lifted. That was announced by U.S. President Donald Trump in a speech made at an investment forum held in Riyadh during his 4-day visit to the Gulf, Trump's first international trip since his return to the Oval Office.
I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
Trump said he made the move at the request of Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, while saying U.S. measures against Syria had now fulfilled their purpose. Syria had been urging the U.S. to lift sanctions since last December, following the ousting of its former dictator. Syria's Foreign Minister Assad al-Shaibani called Trump's decision a pivotal turning point, as Syria enters a phase of reconstruction after years of war. Trump is expected to meet with Syria's interim leader Ahmed al-Sharaa on Wednesday, while U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will hold talks with Syria's foreign minister in Turkey later this week. On Tuesday, Trump called Iran the most destructive force in the Middle East, vowing it would never be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Trump also said he remains open to diplomacy with Tehran, saying he is not just condemning Iran's previous choices.
I want to make a deal with Iran, but if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure, drive Iranian oil exports to zero like I did before.
Also on Tuesday at the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum, Saudi Arabia announced an investment of $600 billion in the United States. The agreement includes an arms deal worth nearly $142 billion, which the White House called the largest defense cooperation deal Washington has ever done, as well as other technology partnerships. 박건우, Arirang News.
So, Trump is Middle East bound for the first major diplomatic trip of his second term. Why the Middle East, and what is he looking to come back home with? Let's turn to Professor Kim Dong-soo. Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's start with why the Middle East? I mean, why go there for his first official overseas trip since his return to the Oval Office?
I think it is likely a highly calculated move driven by a mix of geopolitical strategy and consideration of energy and economic interest. When it comes to geopolitical strategy, Trump intends to strengthen its ties with the Gulf allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who are critical for regional stability, energy cooperation, and arms deals. Also, Trump sees the Abraham Accords as one of his signature foreign policy achievements. He may want to position himself as the only U.S. president able to broker peace or major diplomatic breakthrough in the region. As far as economic interests are concerned, oil has always been a major issue to the United States. He may aim to negotiate energy cooperation with oil-producing countries.
Well, Professor Kim, he is not only going to Saudi Arabia, he's also going to Qatar and UAE afterwards. But I do have to ask, why Saudi Arabia to begin with?
As well known to everybody, Saudi Arabia is a key U.S. ally and one of the most influential countries in the Arab world.
Right.
So by visiting Saudi Arabia first, Trump intends to reinforce the U.S.-Saudi Arabia partnership on defense, energy, and regional security. And Trump also may intend to signal support for Saudi Arabia in efforts to contain Iran and stabilize the region. In addition, Trump administration previously signed a massive arms deals with Saudi Arabia. Trump may want to expand defense and technology contract with Saudi Arabia.
Well, the thing is, Trump's visit to the Middle East is a strategically planned visit, like you said, but there are voices of concern that the trip will only focus on economic diplomacy rather than security when we have, wars going on around the world. What's your take on it? Do you also believe so?
I think it is plausible. The idea aligns well with Trump's transactional approach to foreign policy. While security will always be a backdrop in the Middle East, Trump is likely to frame the trip through the lens of business, trade, and investment. Saudi Arabia and UAE and other Gulf countries are central to oil production and pricing. Trump might seek agreements on stable supply or investment in the U.S. energy infrastructure rather than emphasizing military alliances.
Well, so there are 3 stops that Trump is making in the Middle East, but apparently Israel is not one of them during his trip. Are we sensing some sort of a crack in ties between Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
I think it is premature to call it a full crack. Rather, I think it is because Trump might want to focus on Arab states first. He may want to appear as a regional deal maker, not just a strong supporter of Israel. Not visiting Israel may be a way to present himself as a more neutral facilitator for broader peacemaking between Arab and Israel.
So it's too early to call it a crack between their ties. Now, there are speculations that Trump may stop by Türkiye for ceasefire talks between the leaders of Ukraine and Russia. What is the likelihood that Trump will actually stop by Türkiye and participate in the ceasefire discussions?
If the meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy is realized, then Trump is likely to join the meeting. However, the meeting is unlikely as of now. While Zelenskyy showed intention to meet Putin, the response from Moscow is not very positive yet. So it is not impossible, but I think it is unlikely because the condition for meeting of top decision makers is not very mature yet.
Right. Well, Zelenskyy says he will be waiting for Putin in Ankara, so let's see how that unfolds. Professor Kim Dong-soo, thank you so much for your time and your insights. As always, you have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Now, in the meantime, U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and U.S. envoy for hostage affairs Adam Boehler traveled to Doha on Tuesday to resume negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza. Before departing, the two officials met with families of Israeli hostages in Tel Aviv, stressing their commitment to securing the release of all remaining hostages in Gaza. Witkoff said that there is a genuine chance of making progress in the talks. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the same day that Israel will not stop the war even if hostages are returned. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy and special envoys from the U.S. are headed to Türkiye for peace talks with Russia. However, the Kremlin remains silent on whether President Vladimir Putin will be taking part in the talks himself. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy left for Ankara on Tuesday in hopes of getting a ceasefire agreement with Moscow. However, the Ukrainian president said that he would be going to Istanbul, where Thursday's talks will be held, if Russian President Vladimir Putin attends the talks himself, as he called on the Russian leader to come to the negotiation talks.
We will wait for the meeting with Putin in Türkiye. If Putin is ready to meet, not only for media purposes, but in real life, then on the level of leaders, we will do everything to agree on a ceasefire, because I must reach a deal about a ceasefire with him, because he is the only person to decide.
Over on the U.S. side, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be headed to Istanbul, along with the U.S. Special Envoys for the Middle East and Ukraine, Steve Witkoff and Keith Kellogg. The U.S. officials will look to broker a ceasefire deal, hoping Moscow will agree to a comprehensive 30-day ceasefire agreement. According to Washington, Kyiv has already agreed to such a deal. While Russian officials will be taking part in the negotiation talks in Istanbul, the Kremlin has remained silent on who's going to represent their side at the talks. According to Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, Russia is continuing its preparations for the upcoming talks, but remain tight-lipped on whether its leader will be traveling to Türkiye as well. The U.S., Russia, and Ukraine will meet in Istanbul on Thursday to discuss a ceasefire for the over 3-year-long war. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's job market continued to grow, with on-year employment figures up by 6 figures for a 4th consecutive month in April. Data from Statistics Korea on Wednesday showed that the number of employed people aged 15 or older stood at 28.9 million last month. That's up 194,000 from a year earlier. This marks a gain in the 100,000 range for the 4th straight month starting January, led by job additions in health and welfare, as well as scientific and technical services. But the manufacturing sector continued to face headwinds, showing the biggest drop since February 2019, while construction employment extended a year-long decline.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Starting in Beijing, where Chinese President Xi Jinping met his Brazilian counterpart on Tuesday, pledging to defend free trade and multilateralism amid global trade tensions. During President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's 4-day state visit to China, the two nations signed 20 bilateral agreements to enhance cooperation in agriculture, technology, finance, and other sectors. President Xi emphasized the importance of opposing unilateralism and protectionism, stating that such actions, which he described as acts of bullying, lead to isolation. President Lula highlighted the necessity of China-Brazil relations and said both countries are determined to unite their voices against unilateralism and protectionism. Also on Tuesday, President Lula attended a 3-yearly ministerial forum between China and the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, where President Xi pledged to enhance China's trade and investment in the region. In India's Kashmir region, the Indian Army has eliminated 3 militants. The encounter comes a few days after the recent ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan on Saturday. On Tuesday local time, Indian Army units launched Operation Keller in the Shopian district, a part of efforts to combat terrorism in the region. The operation targeted 3 Pakistani militants, whom the army called hardcore terrorists. It follows the events of April 22nd in Kashmir's Pahalgam, where 26 tourists, mostly Indian, were killed. That attack has been attributed to Pakistani militants. Meanwhile, in a move signaling a return to normal, schools and colleges in non-border districts of Kashmir reopened on Tuesday. Uruguay's former president José Pepe Mujica died on Tuesday, aged 89, following a battle with cancer. Known globally for his humble lifestyle and progressive policies, Mujica served as Uruguay's president from 2010 to 2015. A former guerrilla with the Tupamaros movement, Mujica spent nearly 15 years in prison during Uruguay's military dictatorship in the 1970s and 80s. After release, when democracy was restored in the country, he returned to politics, eventually leading the country in implementing significant reforms, such as the legalization of abortion, same-sex marriage, and the recreational use of marijuana. Finally, in London, the Court of Appeal nullified the 1987 murder conviction of Peter Sullivan on Tuesday. Sullivan, aged 68, spent 38 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Sullivan was convicted for the rape and murder of a 21-year-old victim. However, recent DNA testing revealed that biological evidence from the crime scene did not match him. The Criminal Cases Review Commission, an institute investigating potential miscarriages of justice, reopened the case in 2021. After the court overturned the conviction, Sullivan wept but expressed no bitterness, saying, "The truth shall set you free." The case is considered the longest-known miscarriage of justice in British history.
We are in for another day with a warm-up, feeling like early summer by the afternoon. Strong sunshine continues to shine down nationwide, with the UV index hitting very high levels. And because of this intense sunlight, ozone concentrations across the country could climb to the unhealthy level for a time. So take precautions if you have to spend extended time outdoors. And this afternoon, Seoul will get up to 26 degrees Celsius. Daejeon, Gyeongju both topping out at 28 degrees, Busan at 21 degrees. Then the skies will start to cloud over from tonight, and tomorrow will bring rain to most of the country. It will begin in the central regions Jeollado and Jeju tomorrow at dawn, spreading nationwide overnight. Most of the rain should let up before the evening commute, with 5 to 20 millimeters in the forecast for central area. The early warms will take a break with tomorrow's rain. And it has certainly been a week of fluctuating temperatures, so please take good care of your health.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time.